Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well this Wednesday night. Thank you so much for joining us for our second PH Awareness Month series, the Town Hall webinar. My name is Tanya Kidd, and I serve as the program manager here at Team Phenomenal Hope. And I hope you all are as excited as I am about tonight's discussion. For those who may be joining us for the first time, just a little background. Team Phenomenal Hope is a nonprofit organization founded in 2012 and dedicated to raising awareness of pulmonary hypertension, or PH. Our mission is to empower and support those living with PH through patient-centered programs, education, and community connection, while also advancing research to improve treatments and ultimately find a cure. We also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Johnson & Johnson, CVS, and Merck, whose generous support helps make programs like this possible. First, a few announcements. Team PH has several programs designed specifically to support patients and caregivers in the PH community. This includes our Unmet Needs Fund, which provides financial support, a micro grant of $500 to PH patients for non-medical immediate needs, such as rent, mortgage, utilities, car repairs, transportation, and more. Our bi-monthly virtual support group held on the second Wednesday of every other month beginning in January. Our newest program, Phenomenal Connections Peer Support Program, which provides one-on-one support by connecting and matching patients with other veteran patients based on the type of medication, therapies, treatments, the location, age, hobbies, etc. And Let Me Be Your Lungs, which connects volunteers and PH patients to help raise awareness and funds in the fight for a cure. And finally, the Phenomenal Impact Fund for a Global Research Award. This fund was created to support medical research into improving treatments or finding a cure for PH, and this application will open next month on December the 5th. To learn more about these programs and more, please scan the QR code on your screen. We also want to highlight our final upcoming webinar this month, Navigating the NIH website and resource webinar, Wednesday, November the 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register by scanning the QR code you see on your screen. Also to mention, this session will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel for later viewing. Okay, how to participate tonight. We will have a Q&A immediately after following the first presentation from questions added to the Q&A box. And then we will proceed with the remaining presenters and another Q&A at the end. However, one presenter will allow questions after his presentation. However, questions also may be answered throughout the session within the Q&A box, so keep an eye out. To ask a question, you're going to click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type it in there. We will get to as many as we can. Also, before you all log off this evening, a quick survey will pop up. If you could take just a minute to complete it, and we will truly appreciate your feedback. Once again, your input helps us to continue to offer education and relevant content to our community. And thank you in advance for that. And now we're excited to get started. For a quick overview, I'm going to run down the presenters first, and then we'll go from introductions from there. So first we will have, and pleased to welcome our 2024 Research Award winner, Dr. Jason Weatherall from the University of Alberta in Canada. Dr. Weatherall will be providing a layman's summary of the findings from the feasibility trial of the Canadian Right Ventricular Adaptive CRAVE platform, which explores approaches to targeting the right ventricular failure in PH, and then there will be a Q&A after that. Next, we will hear from our dear friend and dedicated supporter, Allyson Rupp, licensed social worker from Stanford Health, who will be discussing from diagnosis to disability, including navigating employment, self-advocacy, and the support during the disability process. Following Allyson, we will be joined by disability attorney, Mr. Claude Skelton from Nationwide Disability Group, Skelton and Stevens. Mr. Claude's firm serves clients nationwide for various matters involving Social Security Disability, known as SSDI, and Supplemental Social Security Income, known as SSI. He will walk us through the disability benefits application process and key considerations for individuals in the disability review process. And finally, we are pleased to welcome Marie Bosscasino, Information and Referral Specialist at the Mental Health Association of Monmouth. Marie will share information and resources on caregiving support and mental health challenges and tips, an essential part of the PH journey. Okay, all right. With that said, we will begin. Mr. Weatherall, thank you tonight for being here, and the floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the invitation to speak with you all this evening. My name is Jason Weatherald, as Tanya mentioned. I'm a physician in Canada at the University of Alberta, and my area of specialization is pulmonary hypertension as well as lung transplantation. I'm actively working on this study, which we call the CRAVE trial, which has been sponsored by Team Phenomenal Hope, among other sponsors. And so really excited to talk to you about what we're doing. Just for those of you who may not know, Edmonton is a city in Canada. Here it's in the west of Canada. It's actually the northernmost major city in North America, if you're curious. So I just wanted to orient everyone to where I'm speaking to you from. So I'm going to start with just some basics, and we'll build up to the rationale and the design of the clinical trial that we're performing. So it's important to understand a bit of basic anatomy about the heart. So really there's four major chambers. You have the right side of the heart, which consists of the right atrium, which is this smaller chamber called the RA. And then you've got the right ventricle, which is the major pump of the right side of the heart. And this pumps blood into the lungs where this is where your lungs exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then that blood comes back to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium and the left ventricle. And that's the pump that sends blood to the rest of your body. So in pulmonary hypertension, we're talking about high blood pressure in the lungs, and this has mostly an effect on the right side of the heart, so the right ventricle and the right atrium. There are really important differences between the right and the left side of the heart. They're not the same kind of pump. The right ventricle, as you can see here, kind of in a cross section, is actually really thin, whereas the left ventricle is quite thick. So the walls of that muscle of your heart are a lot stronger. And that's because normally the right ventricle is pushing against really low pressure. The blood pressure in the lungs, in comparison to when you get your blood pressure checked on your arm, is only actually 20/6, whereas when you check your arm, a normal would be 120/80. So it's about 5 times lower pressures on the right side of the heart. So it doesn't need to be thick, and it's built this way because this is how we've evolved out of necessity. What happens in pulmonary hypertension, though, is that there's high blood pressure, and this puts a lot of stress on the right side of the heart, and this can lead to right heart failure. Early on during the disease, the right ventricle, which is shown here on an image from an echocardiogram or an ultrasound of the heart, is still smaller than the left ventricle, and that's the way it should be. But over time, the right ventricle has to pump harder against that high pressure, and so it starts to get thicker and it starts to get bigger. But at this stage, we still call this compensated. Over time, in pulmonary hypertension of various causes, we develop what's called decompensated right heart failure. And this is where the right ventricle starts to get really enlarged. So it may be bigger than the left ventricle. And the other chamber of the right side of the heart, the right atrium, is also bigger than its corresponding left atrium. So when we see this is what we're talking about in terms of right heart dysfunction. So it starts to dilate, and then blood actually starts to leak backwards, and this is called tricuspid regurgitation. So blood leaks through this valve, and the right side of the heart is no longer pumping blood forward into the lungs as effectively, and that pressure starts to back up into the liver, which may cause fluid retention in the stomach and the abdomen, and it also backs up into the legs. So patients with this condition will start to get swelling in their legs and their ankles. This is a sign of decompensated right heart, which is not good. So usually doctors will talk about heart failure. They're talking about left ventricular failure. And we actually have a lot of medical treatments for left ventricular failure. We don't have a lot of effective treatments for right ventricular failure. This is how doctors will approach a patient who comes into the hospital with right ventricular failure. We sort of think of five, sometimes six different approaches, which is to figure out why this has happened and we treat the underlying cause. This may be due to an infection or anemia from bleeding in the stomach, or sometimes blood clots, something that has tipped our patients over into heart failure. We use medications that help reduce the pressure that the right side of the heart is pumping against, and this may consist of vasodilators like the pulmonary hypertension drugs that many patients are on, or it may involve combinations of those medications as well. We want to reduce as well the amount of volume that's overloading the right side of the heart, and we'll use diuretics like furosemide to help get fluid off of the heart and make it easier for it to pump. We also have medications that can make the heart pump harder, but these can really only be used in an intensive care unit setting. So these are medications that stimulate the heart to contract harder, and they do have some risks. But when our patients are not getting better, then we have to think of more dramatic and last resort interventions, such as life support machines called ECMO, and even lung or heart and lung transplant. So we don't have at this time any really great treatments that target the right heart itself. This is a figure from a scientific article that is very complicated, and I don't want to go through it all, but it just shows that there are many different potential molecules in the right ventricle that we could target, that we have some science backing, that could be looked at in clinical studies. This may be things that target hormonal imbalances, the muscle cells in the heart, the mitochondria, which are the like the powerhouses of the cell in the heart muscle, as well as different proteins. But all this is just to show that there are many different avenues that we could pursue. But it's a bit harder because right heart failure is much rarer than left heart failure, and it's not clear whether we'd be able to test all of these potential therapies in an efficient way in clinical trials. Usually, a clinical trial looks like this. You've got a group of patients with a condition, and they are randomly assigned to be on an experimental treatment or the control group, which is usually a placebo. And then you follow those patients for a period of time, and you measure the outcome in both groups, and you compare them to see whether or not your new treatment works. Well, there's a somewhat newer and maybe more innovative way of running clinical trials. This is much more complicated, but these are called a platform trial. And these have been around actually for quite a while in the oncology world, and they were used a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic in order to test multiple potential treatments in a more rapid and efficient manner. And much of what we learned about treating COVID-19 in the hospital setting, we learned from platform trials that were being run across the world. Fundamentally, this is a trial design that allows you to compare multiple treatments against a standard of care or a placebo. And so patients are still coming to the trial and randomly assigned to different groups. It may be standard of care or treatment A or treatment B. But over time, as the data on these patients accumulates, you look at the data and you make decisions about what to do with each arm in the trial. So early on, you may find that treatment A has problems. There's maybe either it doesn't work at all, or maybe it's harming people and there's a safety signal. So you can actually drop that treatment out of your trial altogether, but you don't have to shut down the whole operation. It can keep going. So you can continue on with treatment B, and you can collect more data, and you can compare it to the standard of care group to see if there's any signal. And over time, you may find out, in fact, that treatment B works compared to standard of care. But say some scientist or some company has a new molecule, a new drug that they want to test out, they can bring it to this platform and they can just add it in. And so patients can start getting recruited at a future period of time and be enrolled into that arm as well and be compared to the control group. And this can, as new treatments are discovered, you can add them to the platform trial so you can have an ongoing way of testing new therapies, which is a more efficient way to run a trial and actually more efficient for our patients. So we've been thinking about this for some time and have proposed a platform trial that would look at treatments for right heart failure in pulmonary hypertension. Currently, we're at this stage one where we're doing like a mini version of the trial called a feasibility trial to figure out, can we actually pull this off? And so the main approach in that trial is to make sure that it's feasible to do a larger trial, to learn about the types of outcomes that we might measure in a trial, And at the same time, we're doing an embedded study where we're trying to figure out if we can feasibly measure 6-minute walk distance tests using an app that potentially patients could do in their home. And we could use that in the trial, and patients would not have to come back and forth to the clinical trial hospital as often, if this is a valid way of measuring a walk test. And based on the results of this feasibility trial, this will help us design this larger a phase 2 platform trial. So there's 3 phases of clinical trials. Phase 3 is a big trial in which you would test a drug to make sure that it actually works and could get approval for marketing. So phase 2 is the step before that, in which you make sure that something's safe and is likely to work in phase 3. And this is what we've proposed for the next step here. The overall aim of this program is to test new but also repurposed treatments that may exist for treatments of other diseases that have some science supporting the possibility of improving right heart function in patients with PH. And there are several of those out there, and we've aimed to include those in our first trial. So just to back up, I wanted to highlight why I think this is needed and why many of my colleagues and collaborators think that this is needed is that number one, we don't have effective therapies that target the right heart in and when it's failing in patients with PH. And importantly, this applies to patients with all types of PH, not just PAH or lung disease related pulmonary hypertension or CTEPH due to chronic blood clots. This could theoretically be applied to patients with all types as long as the right heart is affected. Again, platform trials allow us to test multiple treatments under what's called a master protocol, which is sort of a guiding document that tells you how to do the trial, but you can add and remove therapies over time using predefined rules. And this improves the efficiency of running a clinical trial compared to doing separate trials for each of those potential treatments. So it may reduce costs, and it's also more efficient for patients. And this is particularly suitable for rare conditions such as pulmonary hypertension, and within that, patients with pulmonary hypertension who develop right heart failure. The idea from this really stems from patients. So I've worked a lot over my career so far with the Pulmonary Hypertension Association in Canada. And a few years ago, we performed this exercise where we went to patients and their caregivers to ask them what questions they had that they wanted answered by future research. And so we called this a priority setting partnership. And we made a list of the top 25 and even narrowed it down to the top 10 research priorities for future research. And 2 of them in the top 10 had to do with the right ventricle. Number 4 was what are the mechanisms or the reasons why right heart failure develops in patients with pulmonary hypertension. And number 5 was which treatments or interventions result in the best outcomes. Now, because we know the right ventricle is the most important determinant of outcomes in PH, therapies that affect the right ventricle and improve its function are more likely to improve the outcomes. Our first trial looks like this. So this is our pilot and feasibility trial. It's a small version of the trial in patients with pulmonary hypertension who have right ventricular dysfunction, which I'll define for you in a minute. And they get randomly assigned to standard of care, which is what we're doing now, a drug called ranolazine or a drug called empagliflozin. And the main thing we're trying to identify in this trial is how many of these patients actually that are eligible want to participate, how many of them are eligible for all of the arms, because there's some reasons why maybe you wouldn't be eligible for either drug. How quickly can we get patients randomized in this study? What are the average enrollment rates, and how often can we actually pick up the tests of interest in the clinical trial, which will help us calculate the number of people we would need for a larger study. So we're trying to look at things as well in this preliminary trial that look at how the right heart functions. So we would use an echocardiogram or an ultrasound to assess the size and function of the right ventricle. We're also aiming to do hemodynamics. So this is a right heart catheter. We're doing the 6-minute walk distance, which is a standard test that we do in person, but we're also measuring it using an app that coordinates with smartwatches to see how well that tracks with the actual value in person, with the hope that if it does track accurately, we might be able to decentralize our next trial in the sense that we can collect a lot of the data from a patient's home environment rather than having them come in person all the time. We're doing blood tests that measure the BNP or NT-proBNP. This is a blood test that's often done to follow patients with PH. That's sort of an index of how stressed out the heart is or how overloaded it is. We're looking at questionnaires, which we call patient-reported outcomes. These are measures of quality of life, as well as we're looking at clinical events like whether or not our patients end up in the hospital, and also safety or side effects. And this is, although it's a small trial, it's been a consortium of multiple funders, including Team Phenomenal Hope, and we're currently running this at 5 pulmonary hypertension centers in Canada. And you can get more information about it on the website for clinicaltrials.gov right here. So currently, these are the people that are eligible. They have to be adults at this time, and they have to be diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension in groups 1 to 4. They have to have symptoms as well. That we use our functional class, which is a scale of 1 to 4. Patients in class 1 really don't have any symptoms. Patients in class 4 may have symptoms even at rest. We're looking at evidence of right heart dysfunction within the 3 months prior to assessment. So patients have to have an elevated blood test of the NT-proBNP, as well as findings on the ultrasound of the heart or the echo that show that the right ventricle is not either not working very well or that it's enlarged. Patients also have to be on standard of care, which at this time is really just water pills or diuretics for at least 4 weeks. And they have to have access to either an Android or an Apple device so that we can measure the smartwatch 6-minute walk distance outcome. And just for those of you who may not be familiar, getting a clinical trial up and running is a really long process. So that publication that I showed you where we engaged patients about their priorities and where the sort of idea from this actually came from, came out in 2021 and 2022. And so we started thinking about this trial around that time, and we got some initial seed funding. We got some more funding to do a planning meeting where we brought patients and doctors together to discuss how we might design this trial. And then we got funding to actually do the trial from one grant, but also from Team Phenomenal Hope. And then we developed the study protocol, but we had to identify how to get these medications. So we had to locate producers and get contracts with them. And then similar in Canada, much like the FDA, you have to get approval to even run your clinical trial. And then it goes through hospital or university ethics boards to make sure that what you're doing is ethically acceptable. One hospital coordinates the trial, and you have to get legal agreements between each hospital that is participating, and this takes a long time. But finally, we've launched the trial, and we're actually enrolling patients currently at all of these sites. Our recruitment target is 30 patients, and we're hoping to have this all done and start the analysis by August of next year, and then the results will be published. Importantly, at the bottom here, I put the patient partner engagement and consultation. We've kept patients really at the core of this study. The idea came from our engagement with patients, and every time we've thought about changing the way the study is running or we have problems with the study, we've gone back to our patient partners that are within Pulmonary Hypertension Association of Canada to get their input to make sure that what we're doing actually matters to patients and is acceptable to them. And just to finish off here, this is what we're planning to do at the next step. So this is really complicated, and what I'm just going to show is really this stuff on the right. So we're proposing a much larger trial, a platform trial in patients with these 3 types of pulmonary hypertension. The reason for that is that group 2 pulmonary hypertension is due to heart disease or left heart disease. And a lot of the treatments that we're interested in studying in this other type of right heart failure are already approved and are in fact widely used in group 2 pulmonary hypertension. So it's really not appropriate to lump them all together when these patients should be on those drugs already anyways. So patients come into the study and they are first assessed for different types of treatments. And so they may be randomized to one of the groups of drugs that they are eligible for. And then within that group, they're randomized again to either the control or a placebo or one of the types of drugs within that class of drugs. So that's what a domain is. A domain might be like, it could even be a device. It might be an injection or injectable drugs. Domain B might be oral drugs. So there's different types, and that way you can make sure that patients are taking a minimum amount of pills as possible. The other thing that's important about this design is that at the end of the trial, patients can actually be re-randomized if they want to participate in the study again. So they may be able to go into a different arm of the study and try something new. All of the stuff on the right is a bit more technical stuff, just for your information. In the phase 2 study, we will be looking at echocardiogram measures of heart function, but we'll also be looking at all of those other things I talked about, like the 6-minute walk distance in person and also remotely using things like smartwatches. Depending on what we find about the acceptability of right heart cath, we may or may not include that. And importantly, we will be looking at things like quality of life and whether or not patients are needing more therapies or ending up in the hospital. So just to summarize here, right heart failure is an important complication of all types of pulmonary hypertension. And currently, there are a few therapies that specifically target the right ventricle in these patients. Right heart failure is relatively rare, so we need efficient approaches to test our potential treatments that are out there. Platform trials are a novel way of doing clinical trials that allow us to test multiple treatments, and it's more efficient in rare diseases compared to running multiple separate clinical trials. Our CRAVE 1 trial will assess the feasibility of performing a larger platform trial to test new therapies for right heart failure in many types of PH. This trial is already underway, with our results are expected in 2026, and we are currently planning for the phase 2 CRAVE platform trial at this moment. Lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge my collaborators and partners on this study, including the other physicians and investigators, as well as the statisticians that have helped us design this. But most importantly, the organizations that have supported this research so far, including Team Phenomenal Hope. There are some collaborators here at the bottom from Canada, but also a colleague from Stanford who has helped us out a lot with the remote walk distance analysis. So thank you very much for joining today. Thank you for your attention, and thank you finally to Team Phenomenal Hope for supporting this project.
Thank you, Dr. Weatherall, for that very detailed layman's summary on your feasibility trial study. And you have a great group of partners there working with you. And that app, the app Heartworks, what an
That's
awesome
right.
idea.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Um, Let me see if we don't have any questions in the chat
Mhm.
um, at the moment. But I have a question for the app Heartworks. Is that you say that's coming or is that already live?
It's already available. It was developed by an organization called PH Aware, and so you can find out more information
Yeah.
about it on their website. It's run by a couple of people that I've become collaborators with. They're really invested in this. They've all been sort of touched by pulmonary hypertension in different ways, and they've developed this app. Which we wanted to use and sort of support because I think it serves the purpose here, and it's very easy as well for patients to use on a smartwatch. They can just press start and do a 6-minute walk test in their home environment at any time, and it's a way that patients may be able to self-monitor a bit closely and look at trends over time. Uh,
Hmm.
we can also ask patients through that app on their watch sort of how they're feeling. We can also push questionnaires to them and sort of ask them about their symptoms or quality of life that way. So the hope is that in the larger trial, we could record a lot of the data for that trial through this app and through the devices and minimize the number of trips that patients have to come back if it's accurate and tracks well with what we're measuring in clinic.
Wow, impressive. Impressive. Thank you. Thank you so much. There is one question I believe just popped up. Let's see. Where will there be a group from the USA included in this study?
Great question. So in the feasibility study, we're only running it in Canada, but we're hoping in the phase 2 study to have US sites and partners in the US that would lead it at US institutions as well as some in Europe, because in order to get the number of patients that's necessary to do a trial like this, it would really have to be multinational. It would take too long
Mhm.
to do it just in Canada. So our goal is to have this at US institutions too.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. Awesome. And I love the timeline that you put there, dealing with the trial.
Yeah, it's been,
Great.
I think it's similarly in the US, but there are a lot of delays and a lot of hurdles in order to get a clinical trial up and running. So just to give people a sense of why it takes so long to do clinical research.
Yes, yes. And once again, highlighting the importance of clinical trials um, in the PH community here. Okay. Um, No more questions? Okay, so we will keep it moving here. Next up, we have Allyson Rupp from Diagnosis to Disability, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking me to participate. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I am the social worker and also the case manager here at Stanford in Northern California, where it is gloomy and windy today, but still daylight almost. I work with patients on the adult side of the hospital and in our clinic who are at all stages of their pulmonary hypertension diagnosis, sometimes pre-diagnosis, and all the way through their confirmed diagnosis, their treatment planning, their transitions between treatments, sometimes discontinuation of treatments toward other things, and all the way through their whole life, both as inpatients and outpatients. So I get to see a lot of really remarkable people doing remarkable things despite a pretty dismal diagnosis, at least when it starts. So I'm going to run you through some of just the practical aspects of what is important to patients who are diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension from more of a practicality and vocational perspective. Oftentimes those things don't come up in your immediate doctor's appointments, but as we are people who need to work and have incomes and live meaningful lives, work is always something that is in the forefront, whether mentioned or not. I'm going to try to make my slides move. I don't know that I can do that. So I might just ask for next slide. Thank you. Wow, it's like you guys read my mind. This is clearly not an inclusive list. And those of you who have pulmonary hypertension or who are family members and friends and support people of those, this isn't necessarily a list of responses that is independent to a patient with this diagnosis, but certainly to all of those in the periphery, oftentimes to the treatment team as well. Either the degree of severity of a diagnosis, the fact that it exists at all, and just how did you get here? Obviously shock, sometimes relief. Hey, I finally know what's wrong. There's a validation to having a diagnosis of something that has a name and that has treatments. So relief on a positive note is sometimes one of those main things we feel. Confusion, overwhelm, denial, fear. What are you going to do next? Activation and motivation of your resources and your, you're thinking about what's next. I can go to the next slide. And this is, I tried to break down really from my experience of what patients have told me, more so than what is solely observed. But you're in the doctor's office or the provider's office, and there's a whole lot of discussion of what pulmonary hypertension is, which our first presenter certainly had a good overview of. But for those of us who've never been to the doctor or never had to deal with any of that, is a very foreign language that the medicine world speaks. So your provider may be telling you, hey, there's treatments, and all you can think about is, are they going to help me and how? Providers saying, it's time to really focus on your health. This is what we're doing. This is a closed conversation in this room, but obviously there's other priorities in the world. You're coming with a whole bit of life experience and family and things around you. And so your mind clearly goes to those priorities. We often in the provider's office say, hey, you need to get a whole lot of people to support you, and you need all these things. Some of those things aren't quite practical. Maybe, your thought goes to, everybody already relies on me. I'm the person who helps everybody. How can I be the person who needs to receive help? How does it even look? How is that supposed to function? Oftentimes we lay out things that we'd like people to avoid, obviously with the goal of reducing symptom burden and ensuring that you can remain safe. A lot of those things we have you avoid are things that are associated with work and function and activity, lifting heavy objects, climbing ladders, doing things that come naturally when you don't have symptoms, but certainly can exacerbate them. And I know when I've had the, oops, there goes my slides. When I've had the fortune of not being ill with a chronic illness, but just ill with a cold or a flu, how hard it is to think of anything else. But who can afford to be sick, right? And who can afford to be sick from an indefinite timeline perspective? It's not practical. It may not be familiar, and it's certainly not easy. And we always want to leave patients feeling like this is going to be okay to some degree. We can manage, we can do things. We'll give you these medications and medical therapies, and you just need to come and see us, 12 times a year, and it'll be super easy. It's never easy. And so your mind may go to, how can I make all these appointments? How am I going to keep my health insurance? How can I keep doing all this and working and doing all the things I already do? Those things don't fall on unsensitive ears, but it's definitely in that stage of being overwhelmed with a new diagnosis. Work with patients. But obviously, this isn't a fluid conversation. It's a dynamic one that comes at different times and different aspects of this, throughout one's diagnosis. It may be upon new diagnosis. It may be 3 years in when we're changing treatments or things have worsened or changed. But I always like to help our patients and families recognize that there's a bit of advocacy that can be done from all the parties involved, and comes from the patient themselves, because you're the only one who knows what you need. Within the medical team, as it pertains to work and making sure we hear your priorities, it's really important to outline what those are in specific terms. It's very important that I work. This is the type of work I do. This is the type of activity that's involved. And these are the things that I need to know that I can do, maybe with some changes, or that I need to stop doing altogether. These are important things to relate to your medical team. It's important for us to also know what helps you feel like you might be able to return to work. And work meaning sort of gainful and meaningful activity to you doesn't always have to be related to financial fortitude, but also just work-related activities, those things that give you meaning, that give you sustenance and give you joy. With your employer, when a diagnosis like PH kind of arises and you don't know all of the ways that it's going to play out yet and what's going to transpire in your health, it's important to kind of do some advanced research, maybe without disclosing fully what's going on, but finding out, hey, I'm just an average employee here. I'd like to know kind of what benefits are available to people who need to take time off work for illnesses. What benefits do I not know exist? How do I access those? It's important for you to understand also and convey to an employer or somebody who's maybe responsible for your work what you can do, focusing more on the activities that you can continue to do and you can continue to do well that aren't impacted by any illness. Can you do more of the things that are really easy and that you can do, and maybe those can overshadow the things that you might have to avoid or things that you have to be accommodated for. It's important also to kind of share those with your family, the people that depend on you and that you depend on. There's a lot of role changes that have to come when there's a chronic illness and a serious one within the family. Sometimes those aren't adapted to very naturally, right? Roles have to pivot a little bit. People may need to recognize that you have your reserves available to do all of the things. And so again, sort of starting early to explore with your family what things have to change. It's an adjustment for all of us within a family. So where can we make some changes? What things do we have to focus on most? Where can we recruit some extra support? Whether that's practical or emotional and just moral support around these things. And we always forget ourselves, right? What kind of keeps you ticking? What's the most important thing to you? You've gotten this devastating diagnosis. You've got a whole list of things to do now. But what's important to you in all of this? And how does work, how does life, how does everything kind of fit in? It's important to, again, reflect for yourself to determine what you need, because you're going to go forward with a process that's going to result in some sort of change, whether that's change that you initiate, whether that's change that happens because that's the course, or things that you don't anticipate but need to have some baseline adjustment to. Next slide. So some of the things, when I do have people that are actively working or have workability, you know, they have been working or doing tasks. I'll include school in this. A lot of my younger folks are in school, in college, job searching, newly kind of in the work world. There's lots of things that, you know, you can kind of gauge timelines for. You can take some initial time off, just like anybody does when you get a virus or a fever and you can't come to work. There's always room for temporary absences, whether that's paid or not, ideally paid, but you often can't come to work when you're sick. So recognize that you're still a normal person who can take normal time off. And it's sometimes a good gauge of how a quick absence is received, or how an unintended or unexpected absence might be received by an employer or someone in an authoritative role. Taking a temporary absence, whether that's a couple of days or through the weekend after your clinic appointment. Some of the pros for that are obviously you have some time for things to sink in. You can kind of spend time thinking about these things. You can adjust to some side effects or medications if you're started on therapies. I also like to think of temporary absences or recognition that, you know, you've had an unanticipated illness come up as a springboard to kind of let the people that it's important to know that you have something going on that's medical. There are lots of protections and things that employers cannot ask. So if you are asking for time off and you're getting like wiggly responses, or you're feeling, you know, just that it's kind of an unsteady or an uncomfortable conversation, that's a springboard for knowing what's next and what to anticipate. Obviously, not working results in loss of income, sometimes a loss of benefits that come from work, and a loss of trust, or at least your perceived loss of trust that your employer or those who depend on you for work may not find you trustworthy anymore or reliable, even if that is not what they feel. It's very common for people to feel like that might be the outcome. We talk a lot about returning to work when things sort of settle down. The dust settles, you've adjusted to things in a fairly, you know, good way. You know what to expect with your medications and your side effects. We encourage people, if work is something that they like and want to do and makes them functional and have, you know, good, you know, place in the world, we want to support people going back to work if that's important. Sometimes you can do that right away with talking to a supportive employer about accommodations, having a knowledge of what might be helpful for you to go back, reducing your schedule a little bit, looking at other things within the same employer to kind of explore whether there's a new role that's a little less physically exertive or something. You can use family medical leave benefits, which is a federal program that I think our attorney representative will talk a little bit about, but there's protections for you as a person with an illness, and for family taking care of one with an illness that is protected by federal initiatives and can be explored by going back to work. I will come back to the vocational rehab program that I want to talk about, but there are times that taking a little bit of time off work can help recenter your brain and think about, again, priorities. And you might think about something that's an alternate career that you thought about that might be a little bit more conducive to fitting in with your medical limitations. That's something that I've had, again, sort of folks that weren't necessarily committed to a certain career path, but were working, and I always wanted to do this. This might be a good time to put a positive spin on a diagnosis and maybe make some time to get into a different field. There is a couple states, not many, not nearly enough states who provide disability programs through the state that gives you some paid time off for when you've worked a period of time that you are entitled to for temporary disability. Those states are listed. There's leaves of absence that many employers do offer and can accommodate. And then some employers certainly have disability benefits that are, private disability plans that you might buy into. Same for long-term disability. These processes are of the federal programs for SSI, SSDI, and retirement, Social Security, are often very, very long processes. So I advise our patients to think about the former things that are listed here prior to jumping into a state or a Social Security long-term disability plan. We don't want to be disillusioned that sometimes it can take upwards of 9 months to get a decision on whether or not you qualify for disability through the federal government. And sometimes the first review results in a denial, and that can be certainly financially demoralizing, but also very challenging to get the stamina to do the next steps. Next slide. I'll briefly touch on a couple things you want to take into consideration when you're adjusting to maybe different types of work, that there are possible insurance losses. I know the health insurance world right now is in a little bit of instability, or more so than normal. So it's important to kind of know what is available to you in your state and your personal world, and otherwise in terms of retaining insurance benefits that may come through your work. Sometimes there is a loss of benefits that is frightening and usually unfair and very, very stressful. These programs for pulmonary hypertension patients are thankfully somewhat abundant and quite accessible for people who are familiar with specialty pharmacies and with specialty care centers that treat pulmonary hypertension. There's often assistance programs to get you the medications you need. There are insurance, without insurance, there are programs that can help you continue to see physicians that you need to, whether that's through hospital programs or local initiatives. And then sometimes, you just got to recalibrate what is financially available to you in the moment and shift things around. If you're being denied disability or you can't work enough hours because your medical condition limits you, looking at things that might be available to you to at least lessen the load of your financial responsibilities, things like utilities discounts, so that your bills are fewer or less. You can get discounted phone services. You can get medications sometimes less expensive than that which your insurance charges. So all these things can help you think about lowering costs that might come from a loss of a job or a brief hiatus from work. And here's back to vocational rehab. So my big soapbox is often when people would like to work, or people find meaning and joy and fulfillment in work, we should do our best to support that, because we are humans who need to be in the world and doing things that feel good. And obviously there's the actual financial need to do so. Most states, I think all states, unless I am mistaken, have vocational rehabilitation programs that are very underutilized, in my personal opinion, which is not grounded in science. They are designed to take anybody who has a verified disability, physical, mental health, traumatic brain injury, learning impairments, divergent neurological conditions, all these things, and they can help assign a counselor to work with an individual to tailor and individualize a return to work, I'll say broadly, a return to function program. They work with people to identify strengths, transferable skills you may have learned in school or in other jobs, and they can really, they are typically offered for free, and they can help get people back into a work environment, either by trialing work, filtering you into volunteer programs to try things out, and back into, very stabilizing careers. I put a web link there. Hopefully this will be posted later and you can also use that link. But if you haven't inquired about something like this in your state, I would highly recommend doing so. They can help oftentimes even provide education and equipment to accommodate a job or to enter a new career path. So one of my favorite and undersung heroes of the vocational world. You can go to the next slide. As I spoke about the financial burden reduction, just a quick plug for public programs that exist out there that are often hard to access, are definitely not available at the same volume and accessibility in every state, but things that I think are important to mention, just they're on your trajectory for times that there isn't a simple answer and you may need assistance. Food, nutrition, residential, etc. Transportation is very expensive when you're going to a specialty center. This is a reminder of the things that exist for folks to get to specialty appointments, especially when you may not be able to drive on your own. I'm happy to explore further if anybody has questions about these specific programs that can help, again, reduce your costs. And then I think we're going to cover, I know we're going to cover some of the mental health aspects of all of this. So just a reminder that a diagnosis like pulmonary hypertension, it's certainly an adjustment of profound proportions. The grief, the processing, the grief of what could have been or what will never be, or of life as you knew it is real. It's something that needs to be reflected on, and it's something that's yours and shouldn't be taken away, but it's something that you can also get through. So some of the tips that I give people who are really kind of just struggling with this, it's kind of acute grief of having a diagnosis like PH, or to identify what can be changed. What can you do about something that you can't necessarily change that exists, but something that you can, what can you do to change your response to it? Not that that's easy, but to give you a sense of control and mastery over your world, it's important to remember that there's always something that you can do to respond differently and hopefully more effectively to what's happening. Really important to continue a routine when you stop working. You'll hear this with people who retire a lot, that they're bored or they don't know what to do. They don't get up at a normal hour. There's social contexts and work and all those things that we lose. So important to try to find a new routine and stick to it to keep your brain active and to keep avoiding isolating yourself from the rest of the world. I think you should expect that people are going to be curious. You stop working, you stop doing normal things. It's important to remember others are curious, probably because they care about you. Hopefully that's the only reason why. Sometimes people are just nosy. But I've often coached patients through thinking about rote responses they can give people that feel good, that won't yield a whole bunch of other questions that might be helpful to use, especially early on when you're kind of sick of explaining what's happening. And then recognize that your social worlds are going to change. I often, you can move to the next slide. I often make sure people go to support groups, work on their mental health as you work on your physical health. The last slide will point out some support groups. and the benefits of such on the next slide. And then I'm going to let the mental health side be addressed by the expert on our panel, but I never want to forget that this is an important aspect of health that we need to certainly pay attention to. So thanks all for your attention. I'm happy to help in any way answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Allyson. Really appreciate that. Great resources. And once again, our Unmet Needs Fund ties right into that. Although it's non-medication, if they need help with utilities, rent, other immediate needs that will not be covered by other resources. So thank you for that. Very good information. And I also agree that vocational rehab is underutilized in many, many communities and states. Yes. So, okay, next up, we are going to go with Mr. Claude Skelton. Going to talk about the disability process and so forth. Thank you for being here today. And if anyone has any questions, once again, you can click in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there, and we will get to those for you. Thank you. Take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say I endorse everything that Allyson had to say. Her presentation was spot on. Those are the issues that we also in the legal profession trying to help the disabled run into every single day. And it's so important that there's attention being paid to those particular needs. And she's nailed it. So I'm happy to follow her. Although my presentation probably will be a little more mundane than what she has put on. First thing, I'm going to talk about the Social Security Disability Program. And unfortunately, I have to tell you, the first thing you need to do when you start thinking about Social Security disability is throw out the words common sense, empathy, and terms that indicate that they're applying deep thought of humanity to these people, that they're adjudicating their disability claims. It doesn't exist. I tell people daily, and it's harsh, and I hate to say it, but that they could sit on the front stoop of the Social Security office and die, and no one inside would blink. And that sounds horrible to say about a government agency, but believe me, after all these years I've spent doing this, it's as close to the truth as I can get. That said, what I'm going to do with my presentation is I'm going to start and just give you a little information about how the Social Security Administration goes about applying their rules to a particular situation. And when I've done that, then I'm going to talk about the practical aspects of filing an application and going through the appeals process and that sort of thing. So to start with, there are two major disability programs with Social Security. The first one is called SSDI. SSDI simply stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. And the way you become eligible for SSDI is when you're working, every time you get a paycheck or a direct deposit, they deduct FICA taxes from your paycheck. And part of those FICA taxes goes to pay for your disability insurance. When it comes time to file a claim, the amount that you can draw on that disability insurance, if you prevail and are determined to be disabled and unable to work, is calculated based on your entire work history. So generally speaking, what you end up getting in disability money is approximately what you would get had you been able to work all the way to your full retirement age, which for most folks right now is 66 and a half or 67. Now, you won't get exactly that amount, but it will be pretty close. So that's the major number one program that Social Security administers for disability is SSDI. The second program is SSI, and SSI stands for Supplemental Security Income. And basically, it is a safety net program. The way you get eligible for SSI is having very little household income. Household income means that it's money coming into the house where, and if it's where you've got a married couple concerned, both of their incomes, if they are earning, count against household income. There's a mundane and difficult computation that goes into figuring, that resulting income, but that's the objective. Not only can you not have much household income, but you can only have a minimal amount of assets or, quote, resources. So if you own anything that's of value above a house and a car, you're entitled to have a house and a car. Above that, then that may be counted as a resource, and so you may not be eligible for SSI because your income and your resources are too much. You're over-resourced for the program. We run into that very, very frequently. So those are the two major disability programs. Both of those programs use the same rules for determining disability. And you start with the statute that creates these programs has a fundamental requirement in it, and that is in order to pursue a disability claim for Social Security, you must have a medically determinable impairment that's going to last 12 months or be permanent. So that's an overlying requirement that you're always looking at. Somebody comes to you with a desire to file for disability. If they have something that's going to be subject to treatment and going to go away in 10 months, or is likely to go away in 10 months so they can go back to work, they're probably not going to be eligible for those programs. So that's a fundamental requirement. The next thing is for disability purposes, Social Security has what they call listings. There are about 100 listings, which are similar in nature. If you've ever looked at an insurance policy on your car or on your house, they're very technically written. It can be very difficult to either read them and certainly to meet them. But there's about 100 of them. And if you meet one of those listings, then you're disabled and you move to the front of the line as far as getting paid and getting on the rolls to draw a disability check. There's these listings are divided into the bodily systems. So you've got like the respiratory disorders, musculoskeletal disorders, cardiovascular system, digestive disorders, and on as these listings are divided up. So if you meet a listing, then you've made yourself eligible for Social Security disability. If you don't have a listing that applies to whatever your particular illness is, you can still apply for and get approved for disability. And there's a couple ways you can do that. One is you can show that you, quote, meet or equal a listing for some other illness or impairment that has a listing. In other words, if you have a symptom that's disabling coming from some particular disease, and you can show that that symptom is bad enough that it meets the one of the cardiovascular listings, or one of the other listings, then you can get approval by just showing you equal this particular other listing. You don't have one for your particular situation. The other way that you can get approved is by showing that your functional capacity, your ability to function, especially in the work environment, it has been so diminished that you can no longer work. So that in order to do that, you use the functional occupational type examinations to show how much you can lift, how far you can walk, how long you can sit, what you can pick up, what you can carry, whether you can, on the mental health side, whether you can pay attention, whether you can take instructions, whether you revolt at authority, whether you can remember things that you need to remember to carry out a job. So what you do there is you may have someone that has 10 or 12 different conditions, and we see those all the time. And each one of them diminishes that functional capacity, so that when you go over the symptoms you have for each one of those, there's not really anything left for the person to work with. So that's the listing system that gives you the measure that you have to meet to get on disability. Moving on to the topic today, regular hypertension. There is no listing for hypertension, high blood pressure. So that doesn't mean that you can't get on disability for high blood pressure, chronic high blood pressure. What it does mean is that you've got to take the symptoms from that high blood pressure, and you've got to show that they either so diminish this person's ability to perform that there's nothing left, or that they when you compare them with a listing that is available, that they satisfy or equal that particular listing, so that you then achieve the purpose of getting them approved for disability, even though there's no listing for hypertension. We don't see those kind of cases very often just for hypertension. It's because it is so difficult to from an evidentiary standpoint to prove that you've got enough symptoms or they're severe enough to keep you completely out of the workforce. For chronic pulmonary hypertension, there is a listing. So, and it's pretty simple. I'll simply read it to you. It's only a couple of sentences. Chronic pulmonary hypertension due to any cause. See section 300. Documented by mean pulmonary artery pressure equal to or greater than 40 millimeters of mercury as determined by cardiac catheterization while medically stable. That's the listing for chronic pulmonary hypertension. If you meet that listing, then you're disabled, and you can go to the disability line and draw your disability for that particular illness. That short listing sounds like it might be easy to meet, but when you get into the meat of it and start looking at what's required, it's very difficult. very few people that we represent for disability purposes meet a listing. It's unusual for someone to meet a listing. Generally, you find that where people have terminal illnesses of various kinds. But if I tell people all the time, you know, you don't meet a listing, and I'm not sure you want to meet a listing, because listings generally are only met by people who have something that is a really grave illness. So that's the situation there. Now, so you've got your listings, and then the two ways other than a listing to get approved for disability, one being reduced functional capacity. And generally for younger people, when you say reduced functional capacity, you've got to go and eliminate even a job where you would just sit. And Social Security has jobs, a listing of jobs that they used as measurements, and some of them are so ridiculous that you just have to chuckle when they tell you this person could do this particular job. We have a whole list of jobs that are so outdated. Just for instance, a nut picker, someone who would sit at a table and pick the meat out of a pecan or a walnut. That job's not out there anymore. I mean, that's ridiculous. And but there's just many of jobs just like that they'll say that this person could do, even though their data is very old, last updated about 1993. And they continue to say they're going to update it, but never do. Talking about the process, I think Allyson mentioned 9 months. As a general rule, that's probably too short. And it's too short no matter what you do. I tell clients all the time, we can do everything we can do legally. But when that file is sitting on a caseworker's desk, until they pick it up and work on it and make a decision from it, your case is not going anywhere. We have on occasion literally sued to make them move on a file. But there are so many ways that they can procrastinate or fail to work on a case that even suing them is a remedy that really doesn't work very well, because you get them to move it to the next desk and then you run into the same thing all over again. We across the country, we tell folks that 9 to 14 months is a reasonable expectation, but cases can run as long as 18 months or 2 years. They can also be as short. I've had people approved in 2 days, but what the person had that I got approved in 2 days, nobody wants, because they expired within another 10 days after they were approved for disability. So, but here's the way it works from the practical standpoint. The first thing you do is you prepare and file an application. That can be done by the person themselves. It can be done online. It can be done by Social Security. You can call them and they'll set up an appointment with you. This is simply a form that you fill out. There are some important things that need to go in it. One is your onset date. When did you become disabled? And you need to list every single impairment that you have. it's not, if you just have one, just list one. But whatever you've got, from migraines, blood pressure, insomnia, whatever it is, needs to go on that application because it may prove to be useful later. The second thing needs to go on there is every doctor that you've seen, because the fundamental thing that gets people approved or not approved in the disability world is medical records. As you notice, when I went over that fundamental requirement for disability, that you must have a medically determinable impairment, means that you have to get a medical examination. You have to have medical treatment in order to generate a medically determined impairment. So what the client has to say their condition is may be interesting, but it doesn't carry very little weight at all. What the family may know, mother, father, children, they won't really pay any attention to it at all. The only thing that you can really use evidentiary-wise to convince Social Security that someone is disabled is medical records. And the reason it's the fundamental problem as far as Social Security is concerned stems both from practical problems with the people, lack of transportation to get to the doctor, no money, no insurance. We see people all the time who are disabled who have absolutely no medical records, haven't seen a doctor in 5-6 years. There's really nothing we can do for them. Now, we can take them on as a client and have Social Security do what's called a consultative exam. It's difficult to have to say this, but it's also the truth, and it's just the way things are. The consultative exam most of the time lasts just a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Social Security doesn't pay much for it. Most doctors don't want to do them. So it's a very short exam. If the person can walk in the door and sit down in a chair and walk out, probably they're just fine. If they can hold up 4 fingers, and count backwards from 3, they're mentally okay. So a consultative exam really is not going to be very helpful at all. So we get questions not once or twice or whatever, but daily, over and over and over again. I don't have the money to go to an orthopedic doctor. I don't have transportation. And they're just in limbo as far as getting anywhere with their disability case. So the other part of that is when you get their medical records, if they've been able to go, many times there's not a lot in them. Saw a patient today, ask them how they're doing. They say they're okay. Blood pressure, okay, blah, blah, blah. And no real question and answer about the underlying symptoms that they're having, maybe from migraines or who knows, heart disease or whatever. So you may have a good many records, but they're just not very good. But anyway, listing any source that you've got of medical records on that application is important. Some providers, legal providers who work won't take cases until an application has been filed. And a lot won't take them until there's been a denial. That's fee related, because if you have to do the application and you have to fill out all the forms, you're investing in a case that's a contingent, where you get a contingent fee, and the likelihood, it reduces the likelihood of you being able to get paid. So that's where that comes from. But so you can get social workers at the hospital will help generally. A lot of people get their friends, their children, or whatever, help them prepare the application. From a practical standpoint, and I haven't looked at the statistics in the last, month or so, but approximately 70% of of all applications filed nationwide for disability are denied at the first level. 70%. So once there is that denial, the next thing you do is you file an appeal. That's called a request for reconsideration. And basically what that request for reconsideration calls for, and what it really wants, is any medical developments that you have incurred since the last time you filed an application. It's an update of your application and making any arguments or additional thing that you can make. The practical side of a request for reconsideration is that 90% of those are denied. Only 10% of people generally across the board are paid on that first appeal. If that appeal is denied, then you appeal again, and what that involves is requesting a hearing before an administrative law judge. Now, this is not a Perry Mason trial situation. These are trained Social Security judges, and they generally they show up at the hearing. We do them all by telephone now or by video, but mostly just by telephone, and that works just fine. That doesn't create a problem. But the judge generally knows when he walks in the room what questions he wants to answer. And those questions generally are the kind that are suggestive of, I've noticed or suspect you're lying about this, or that you really don't have that, or whatever. So they're probing the applicant to see if they can verify something to use to turn them down. So that's and whether or not you prevail at a hearing is going to depend on where in the country you are. The different Social Security offices across the country have different approval rates, and different judges within the same office have different approval rates. So, for instance, for a long time, there was a judge in Springfield, Missouri, that approved only 16% of the ones that showed up in front of him. The average approval rate across the country is about 42, 45%. So he was approving half as many or less than half of what everyone else approved. We've got several judges who once we see who the case is assigned to, we know it's not going anywhere. They just don't approve anybody. And the quality of your evidence and the arguments you make really fall mostly on deaf ears. Now that's a bad thing to say, but that is the honest, that's the truth about the situation. The system with Social Security may not be totally broke, but it's certainly badly bent. And it's not bent in favor of the people who seek disability. So if you are dissatisfied with the the decision of the judge, and you're likely to be, because even a good judge is going to approve only less than half of the people's cases he hears.
Mr.
Then
Claude, that I'm sorry to interrupt you. We do have a few questions. That's one of them. How many times are you to be denied? Someone asked that if you are, what are the average number of rejects from Social Security before someone is approved?
Well, let the answer to there's two more steps here. The first one is you can appeal to the appeals council if you can show that the judge made an error, made a mistake. Now, the appeals council is not going to approve your case. They're simply going to see if the judge made a mistake, and if he did, they're going to send it back to him and tell him to do it over. That's how that appeal part works. Once he makes his decision, once the judge has made his decision and it's gone to the appeals council, you can file a case in federal court to get that case reviewed. So, you've got the initial denial, you've got the denial reconsideration, you've got the denial for the judge, you've got the denial at the appeals council probably, and then you take it to district court. So you could have 5 different denials in the same case. All right. If we've got a really good case, what do? It may not be a case that we want to take to court because that can get expensive in a hurry. We go back and file a new case and start all over again, if that's what the people really need. And we continue to do that until we either get them approved or we just wear it down to the point to where we have to say that this is just not going to happen. So to answer that person's question, it's just not possible to say how many denials you can get, because if you continue to file repeatedly, you could file 3 new applications, one behind the other, trying to get approved. But nationally, I don't know if there is a number other than to say that, like I said a minute ago, the average across the country, the average approval after altogether after it's been before an administrative law judge is about 40%, 45%, somewhere in that range. And it'll vary a little from year to year. You can go on Google, and you can Google administrative law judges for Social Security, and you can pull up every judge's record. And it will show you how many cases they handled last year, how many they got, how many they approved, how many they denied, and what other dispositions they made. So you can spot those judges that are really, really hard to deal with.
Wow. Thanks for, that's good information to know that you can actually look that up. Okay.
Am I running out of time?
We're a little bit over time. If you just want to sum up some, but I definitely want you to share your information for your firm in case anyone wants to reach out for a free consultation.
All right. Well, I think what I would like to leave everyone with is this is a hard process, but that you've paid for it.
Right.
You paid for it with your taxes.
Yes.
The SSDI. You should make an effort to get what you paid for if you need it.
Yes.
On the other hand, as far as talking about your particular issue here we're talking about, people should be aware of the fact that if they see from diagnosis or the symptoms they're having that they're likely at some point to have to file for disability, they need to start doing their homework. Just like anything else, you need to prepare. And how do you prepare? Well, you've got to work with your medical providers and try to get them to help you document the gravity, the severity of your condition, the symptoms you're having, the severity of severity of those symptoms, and running whatever tests that need to be done, because it's those medical records, it's a result of those tests that either are going to get you there or not get you there. And it's too late to really, when you get down to the point where you really have to have it, and you haven't built up this medical file that's useful. You also need to be able to show that you complied with your doctor's recommendations. In other words, you've sought treatment and you've availed yourself of that treatment, and you've done the things you're supposed to do. So, and the other thing that I haven't really made much of, but is so important, is age. If you're under 50 years of age, you must show that there's no work in the national economy that you can perform. That includes what we call sedentary work where you just sit and do very little. And even at 50, they're gonna have to give you a little boost there, because the dividing line starts at 55.
Yeah.
After you're 55 years old, what you have to show is that you can't do your past type of work. So if you're 55 and you have this condition, and you can show you have this condition and it's severe and you have these symptoms from it, and you can't do your past job of truck driving or working on the railroad or whatever, then you can be declared to be disabled. If you're, say, 36, then you face a really uphill proposition, simply because there you got to show not only can you not do your past type of work, but you can't do any work in the national economy.
Yes. Wow.
I think I've about exhausted the kind of thing that would be helpful for you here, but I certainly would be willing to go over anything else that anybody's got to ask.
And I also want to share this comment that says you were you covering this topic very completely, and you thought it was going to be mundane, but it's totally opposite. And someone said it's a lot of this topic covered in online Facebook groups with different opinions, but yours is really rooted in fact, and so it's refreshing to hear you speak and give these details.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This is all we do. My entire practice career, and I'm not going to tell you how long that is, but it's long, has been in either in the field of administrative law, either fighting against the government or for the government. Wow. In these types of cases. So we handle a very large volume of cases, and the way we do it is we have really good people who have good hearts, who have their hearts sometimes too close to their sleeves, because some of these can really turn into situations where you can get emotionally involved with your client and feel terrible for them, because they're, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them are by no fault of their own. I get these calls every day. I'm going to be homeless if I don't get my money. I can't pay my doctor bills. I can't pay my mortgage. I can't pay my car payment. I don't have food in the house. I've got children. I got a house full of children. And so what we do is try to tell them the kind of things that Allyson was talking about earlier. But a lot of places there just aren't any resources.
No,
It's
yeah.
really, it can really be tough on folks.
Yeah. Actually, we just had someone in the comments that state that exact comment that they need help now. They're about to be homeless. And I know I used to work with the clinic, and people would, attorneys will send them to our clinic to get medical exams and records to even start a record for disability. So definitely correct. And I greatly, greatly appreciate you. We're gonna have to have you come back for a deeper dive. I'm gonna
All
I'm
right.
having yeah.
Last thing, if you got folks out there that are going to seek help to do this, to get it done for them, watch out for the people that you see advertising on TV all the time. There is a whole group of those folks, and here's how they practice. They sign people up. They once they got them signed up, the folks probably never hear from them again until it gets down to a hearing.
Yes.
They'll call them and talk to them in the hallway for 5 minutes, a lawyer they've never talked to before.
Yep.
And then they either win or lose. And if they win, the lawyers get paid. If they don't win, that it's okay. They just move on to the next 20 that they've got. That's not what they want. They want people who make their money the old-fashioned way. They work for it. So
yes, and you have a right to fire your attorney if you feel like they're not.
Absolutely. Right up until the last minute.
Yes.
Our phone number is 501.
I'm gonna put it in the chat, 501, and then I'll
481
8923.
And you can call anyone out there that's seeking disability, can call us and we'll talk to them anytime.
Thank you so much, Mr. Claude. I greatly appreciate it. And like I say, I will probably have you come back, and so we can talk about this topic. And because there are so many, I'm sure many more questions regarding this process, because it is daunting and it is time consuming.
Well, I hope I covered some of the things that.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
I'm going to go cook my wife dinner. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Okay, next, if everybody can just stick around, we have Marie Bosscasino will speak now on the mental health and resources for caregivers and patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? We're going to run through these slides very quickly for the sake of time. Thank you all for hanging in there. Thank you to Tanya and Team Phenomenal Hope for having me, and all of the wonderful presenters who covered a lot of this information anyway. There was so much amazing information, and like I said, my information, I'll run through it quickly. It'll be recorded in with the program. And if you need access to the slides, you can always reach out to Team Phenomenal Hope. Next slide. Just want to do a quick overview of the various dimensions of wellness, which a lot were covered this evening. Obviously, we're talking about, physical health, but also spiritual, emotional, social, financial was just discussed, and the importance of all of it and how it all works together for the sake of our overall well-being, and how different aspects may be more prevalent in need at the time. Next slide. Can you tell I'm from New Jersey?
Yes.
Various roles of the caregiver. So one thing that I specifically appreciated tonight that Allyson brought up was just talking about the different sides of caregiving. So the individual with a chronic illness could very well be the caregiver, or the person who is a loved one, family member, friend, or maybe a professional who's also a caregiver. And it affects the caregiver in various ways, because it's not an easy journey in any capacity. So just understanding what the various roles of a caregiver could look like, and it could be assisting with daily living needs, errands and chores, helping with bathing and dressing if needed, transportation, mobility needs, or it could be the financial needs, tasks, paying bills. It could be encouragement, such as, just even having all these wonderful support groups and someone helping to, outside of that, continue with that encouragement, support, and maybe helping people connect with social outings and feeling more like themselves, especially when they're going through various health challenges. Next slide. Recognizing the signs of burnout is vital, and it's very common, particularly in caregiving, again, no matter where you are in that journey. Sometimes we don't realize what may be affecting us as we're caring for someone who is going through something that maybe we can't do much for them other than help in the capacities that we at least try. And it could be a phone call, it could be a ride, it could be something to do with, a medical appointment. But no matter what it is, the caregiver needs to care for themselves in order to be there to care for others. So if someone's feeling emotionally exhausted or detached, maybe more reactive than usual, headaches, fatigue, people don't realize, we all know the importance of sleep, but maybe not realize how much what we're experiencing day to day, especially when we are caring for others, how that sleep may be affected. Our loss of motivation, our own difficulty concentrating. Lots of times we blame maybe age or the lack of sleep, but we might not realize that trying to keep up with things day to day will affect our concentration. Practical self-care strategies are, to me, one of the most important things is taking that time for yourself. And self-care, self-forgiveness, when you are feeling a certain way and maybe not realizing why, or are you allowed to? But you know what? We are all people. We all matter. And setting boundaries for ourselves and taking regular breaks, avoiding, this is a hard one, avoiding taking other people's struggles with us. We can be there for others, but that doesn't mean we have to keep it with us, if you know what I'm saying. And even if you're the individual with the chronic illness, it's okay to be like, you know what, today I don't feel well and I can only go so far today. And that's okay. And that's why communication and also working on your own mental health is very, very important. You can care deeply for someone, but healthy boundaries are good because in the whole scheme of life, when you take that time to care for yourself again, you're going to be better for others. Staying connected with supportive people in your own world, your own peers and friends, and taking that time to relieve stress. Engaging activities that bring joy and relaxation. And it could be crocheting, it could be a cup of tea. I work in the mental health field, and I actually do work with a lot of people with various levels of mental, physical, and developmental challenges, as well as homelessness. And honestly, there are days that I just sit down quietly listening to the ocean or the birds, because I get to live by the Jersey Shore, so it's really cool. Next slide. Self-care for the caregiver, like I said before, caring for other people, especially with a medical condition, or if you're the individual with the chronic illness and you're caring for others, it's emotionally demanding, overwhelming. It could even be isolating. I don't think people always recognize the level of isolation. They think that you're involved and you're there, but maybe sometimes because you don't have much time for yourself, you don't realize how much you might be cocooning. Self-care is essential for maintaining that well-being and again, finding support with others. It's not selfish, it's self-preservation. And as they often say, you cannot pour from an empty cup, or very often you hear people talk about taking the oxygen mask for yourself. And the reason that self-care matters is it does help prevent that burnout and compassion fatigue. That's a topic all within itself. And I don't know if you've all ever touched upon that, but that could be something too that we could always touch upon in the future if anybody's interested. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because people don't realize, especially if you're a very compassionate, empathetic individual, but that you can get very wiped out from trying to stay in that space all the time without giving yourself a break. Promoting your own personal health, emotional balance, and resilience. And when you model healthy coping for those that you may be supporting, you're helping in their own care, because when you model, you're showing them as well what they can do, right? Not do as they say, but as I do. Next slide. Just grab some resources that I thought would be very pertinent to your community, and Allyson already touched upon them. So the links are on the bottom. Like I said, the slides will be available both through the recording as well as if you reach out to Team Phenomenal Hope. Next slide, please. Some more resources. I definitely tried to find things more for the caregiver, again, in whatever capacity is that role. Next slide. I particularly found this resource very interesting because I love the fact that it was international. And I think the key is lots of times is being able to connect within your own community. And as they were talking before about how challenging it is to reach out to certain resources, where I live, we happen to have a lot of resources and programs, but one of the challenges that I love to offer is, even though I live where I live, if someone, in which you'll have my information shortly, but if somebody reaches out to me, I don't just say, sorry, I live in New Jersey. I will do what I can to help connect you with the resource in your community to the best of my ability. Next slide. I work for the Mental Health Association of Monmouth County. We are an affiliate of Mental Health America. No matter where you live throughout America, if you need to find an affiliate, and I actually think we have some internationally, this is how you can do that. And again, the link is on the bottom. Next slide. NAMI, which is also another mental health organization, but also they have support groups, family support groups throughout the country as well. And there's ways that you can find groups in your community. Next slide. And of course, 988, very important. I hope no one ever needs it, but it's also a crisis lifeline. An individual doesn't necessarily have to be expressing suicide ideation, but if they're just feeling really, really overwhelmed and unsure, or have an individual that they're very concerned about, they can reach out to that line as well. Next slide. And that's me. So if you need any further information, there it is. You could call, you can email, you could reach out to our agency. You could even do direct contact if you do not have to live in New Jersey, like I said, to reach out to us. I've actually very often helped people in other states, and I even had someone reach out to me from Nova Scotia. So I've been more than happy to. And next slide is a thank you. Thank you all again for letting me be a part of your evening, and I wish you all the best.
Wow, thanks, Marie. We greatly appreciate you. And I'm sorry you had to run through your slides so quick, but we will most likely have you back. We know that Mental Health Awareness Month is very important. So we may put something together to have you to come back for that. You did present for us last year as well. So and you have a lot of great resources, and we want to definitely always have something available for our caregivers, because, self-care for caregivers is important. And thank you to know that you don't have to be in New Jersey. You can help anyone anywhere. So I really, really appreciate your time and your effort of putting together that slide. And once again, this will be recorded. So I'll send that, show you the link for that if you want to share it for any of your patients or clients that come through as well. So thank you so much for that information. And there was no questions for this particular discussion. So I'll go ahead and wrap it up and say thanks everyone for joining us. And once again, our programs, to learn more about them, you can scan the QR code on your screen there. And again, special thanks to our sponsors, J&J, CVS, and Merck. And hope everyone has a great night tonight. And we will see you all again soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.